Echoes in the nights. It was a typical night at the Elite Contact Solutions call center. The night shift had just begun, and employees were settling into their routine of answering calls from irate customers from halfway across the world. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the rows of cubicles, but it did little to dispel the growing unease that had been creeping into the office over the past few weeks. Liza, a seasoned agent, sat at her desk, headset on, mechanically reciting her usual script. But tonight, something felt different. She could sense a cold draft, even though the air conditioning was set to the usual temperature. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she caught sight of a shadow flitting across the corner of her eye. "Did you feel that?" she whispered to her colleague, Mark, who sat at the desk next to hers. Mark looked up, his face pale. "Yeah, it's been happening a lot lately," he admitted. "Last week I heard someone whispering my name, but when I turned around, no one was there." The rumors had been spreading like wildfire. Employees reported strange noises, cold spots, and the feeling of being watched. Some even claimed to have seen a figure standing in the break room, only for it to vanish when approached. It was as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets in the dead of night. Liza tried to shake off the unsettling feeling as she returned to her calls. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere in the office grew more oppressive. At around 2 a.m., when the calls were fewer, Liza decided to take a quick break. She headed to the pantry, hoping a cup of coffee would calm her nerves. As she entered the dimly lit room, she froze. There, standing by the window, was a figure, a woman in a white dress, her long hair obscuring her face. Liza's breath caught in her throat. The figure seemed to shimmer, almost as if she were made of mist. "Hello?" Liza called out, her voice trembling. The figure slowly turned, and Liza caught a glimpse of a pale face, eyes hollow and dark. Before she could react, the lights flickered, and the figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of jasmine in the air. Terrified, Liza bolted from the pantry, nearly colliding with Mark in the hallway. There's something in the pantry," she gasped, Mark's face drained of color. "You saw her too, didn't you?" he whispered. "The lady in white." As the night progressed, the tension in the office became unbearable. Liza, Mark, and a few other employees gathered in a corner of the break room, too frightened to continue working. Mark, who had been with the company the longest, began to tell the story he had heard from one of the security guards. Years ago, before this building was a call center, it was an old office complex. There was a woman who worked here. Maria was her name. She was quiet, kept to herself. One night she stayed late, finishing up some work. No one really knows what happened, but the next morning, they found her dead. They said she jumped from the window, but others believe someone pushed her. The group listened in horrified silence as Mark continued. They say her spirit never left. She's trapped here, reliving her last moments, and she haunts anyone who works the night shift, especially those who stay too late. Liza's heart pounded in her chest. "But why is she showing herself now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark shrugged. "Maybe she's trying to warn us. Maybe she doesn't want to be alone." The clock struck 3 a.m., the hour when the veil between the living and the dead is said to be thinnest. The group of employees huddled together, too afraid to leave the break room. The lights flickered again, and this time, they didn't come back on. Panic set in as the darkness enveloped them. Liza fumbled for her phone, using its flashlight to cut through the gloom. "We need to get out of here," she urged, but as they made their way to the exit, the temperature dropped sharply. A cold wind blew through the office, and the faint sound of weeping echoed through the halls. The group froze in terror as a figure materialized before them. The lady in white. Her mournful eyes met theirs, and her lips parted in a silent scream. Suddenly, the door to the stairwell burst open, and a man stepped through. He was disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty. "You need to leave," he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "She's coming for you all." The employees didn't need to be told twice. They bolted for the stairs, not daring to look back. As they descended, they could hear the man's voice fading into the distance. "Forgive me, Maria, forgive me." The next day, the surviving employees gathered in the manager's office, recounting the horrors they had witnessed. The management dismissed their claims as hysteria, refusing to acknowledge the supernatural. However, the employees knew what they had seen. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. She did some digging, uncovering old newspaper articles about the building's history. What she found sent chills down her spine. Maria hadn't jumped. She had been pushed by a jealous lover, a man who had worked in the same office. He had escaped justice, but it seemed that his guilt had finally caught up with him. The man who had appeared in the stairwell was him. He had been haunting the building alongside Maria, doomed to relive the night of her death. But there was one final twist that Liza hadn't expected. As she closed the last article, she caught her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop. Over her shoulder, she saw a familiar face, the lady in white staring back at her with hollow eyes. Liza gasped and turned around, but the room was empty. The haunting wasn't over. The spirits of the past were still there, waiting for the next unlucky soul to stumble into their eternal torment.